I am an extremely passionate and committed human services professional who possesses an in-depth working knowledge of the psychological and sociological aspects of human development. I consider myself to be a cognitive behavioral specialist, believing that making a change in how one thinks brings about a change in what one does. Many shy away from therapy because they feel their situations are either unique or they are fearful, embarrassed, or ashamed to let others know they need help. SciSpot is my way of corralling pertinent personal, professional, and academic information on understanding human development in one place for all to access privately and even share with others. My personal mission statement is, I am driven by divine precepts and an undying passion to facilitate change in the lives of others. What's yours? Let SciSpot guide you through your healing and provide you with many other ways of becoming better today than you were yesterday. Come on in and join me.
And good morning, and welcome to SciSpot Live. I'm your host as always, Shabir Aleem. Beautiful day here in sunny Florida, Riviera Beach, Florida. It's about 66, 67 degrees right now. I came out here an hour ago, man, to start setting up for this morning show. I like to froze. I went back upstairs, got my little furry slippers, put on some socks, put on my little warm furry robe, and man, listen, I think it was probably about maybe 58, 59 then. You couldn't tell me it wasn't in the 30s. But it's all good. You know, I got up this morning, man, and I went and took me a nice warm shower, and I used this stress relief soap from Bath and Body Works. Yeah, I go there. Guys, stop with this old nonsense. That's girly stuff. Listen, it doesn't make any sense, right? Check this out. Now, I've seen women throughout the years of my life go to Bath and Body Works, get stress relief soap, sleep soap, the sprays, the lotion, all this kind of stuff, and I'm saying to myself, like, well, wait a minute. If it works for you, why wouldn't it work for me, right? Because the reality of it is, it didn't say for women only, but we become conditioned to believe that certain things are just specific to the use for women and not men. I don't want rough, dry, scaly skin. I don't know about you, right? I don't know about you. I got enough muscle tone that you won't be confused if you start caressing me that you don't feel like I'm softer than you as the woman, right? So I got enough muscle tone to handle that. But at the end of the day, I want to age gracefully. I want to continue to look, you know, like I take care of myself. I want to continue to take care of myself. So I took a shower, and I used the, it's like eucalyptus and some other stuff in it. Then afterwards, I put the lotion on of the same. And I also sprayed my pillows with this stress relief and sleep relief kind of stuff. Man, listen, and the stuff works. It really does. It kind of brings you down. It's like you can kind of have that woo-saw moment, and you can kind of get focused and move forward, right? And I sleep really good at night when I spray my pillows. You know, I mist my pillows with the stress or the sleep sprays, and it works really good. So, you know, and preparing for the show, it takes a lot of work, especially when I'm looking at the emotional stuff that it drums up even within me. And I keep telling people, listen, I don't just do these shows, right, for you, right? I mean, I do them for you, but this helps me. I'm helping myself. You know, when I can sit down and I can talk about some of the things that are near and dear to me as a human being, right? We tend to think that it only happens to us, that it's only us. You know, I learned a long time ago, you know, my situation may be unique, but the event is not unique because it's happening, and it's happened to many others, right? We see in the news all these cases of sexual harassment. We see these sexual assaults that have taken place. That's what it is. It's a sexual assault, all right? But anywho, it's another show. But we see all these things taking place, and we hear years later about sexual assaults that have taken place. And we hear mostly about women, right? But what's his name? Cruz, came out and he, came forth with, what happened to him. And there are a lot of males who experience sexual abuse in all forms. In all forms. I talked about how at the age of 13, I was having sex with a 21-year-old, 22-year-old. She's 21, 22. And how at the time it was like the best thing since sliced bread. But later in the years, right, it affected my relationships. And even today, I have to look at myself and my relationships with women and seeing how, these relationships played out, throughout the years and how they have developed into what they are today, in the relationship. So it's a matter of, there's a lot of things that we keep downplaying that are serious, that are really, really, really serious. And it's not until adulthood when we begin to find out, like, whoa, something else is happening here. But we don't think in those terms. We tend to think in terms of we're blaming the partner, right? We're blaming a previous partner, right? And, even though those situations may very well have had or have an impact on your relationships today, the reality of it is this started a long time ago. A long time ago. See, resilience is one thing, right? But what your mind contains within is something that is going to always be there, and it's going to always resurface when it wants to. It will rear its ugly head at any given time. And we have to learn how to get it under control. And sometimes, depending on where we are, spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally, listen, all those things are significant as to how we deal with those things in our lives. That's the bottom line. And that's for all of us. That's for all of us. So when we started looking at the 4 ways that childhood trauma affects adult relationships, right? I was about to move into the solutions and bring a resolve to some of those things. But one of the things that I decided I wanted to go back, because I told you ways how that trauma affects or can affect adult relationships, but I want to talk about the trauma in itself. See, this is where the real work comes in. Because when you start looking at your life, right, from birth, even when you have discussions with your parents about the pregnancy, right, things that were going on, in the mother's life during pregnancy. Where was the father? What kind of relationship did they have? What kind of things did they do together in preparing for the birth, right? Was it a stressful birth? Was the person using drugs or alcohol? What factors, existed in that environment? We need to know all those things because these things are significant because they're passed on to the child. How? Because 23 chromosomes are contributed by each parent. By each parent, right? So we want to look at what environment the mother was in, at the time. What was going on with the father, because, even though the mother is the one who's carrying the child, right, the father is living a life as well. So those 23 chromosomes that he contributes also are part of the child, right? So if he was under stress, if he was using, abusing alcohol and drugs, if he was running the street, if he was incarcerated, right, what kind of childhood did he have? What kind of childhood did he have? So we have to look at all those things, right? So then we start looking at after the child is born. What kind of environment is the child brought into, right? And not just in the home life, right? Who babysits the child, right? What kind of school environment was the child going to, right? Who was the primary caretaker? Who were the secondary caretakers? What kind of relationships were had with the siblings? We got to look at that, right? We have to look at all of the things that took place, right? And there's an age bracket where certain events happen, and I think I might have it on the list here today. But there are so many things that take place that we miss what's happening with our child. And it's all playing out. It's been playing out for years with our children in the streets, especially with the elevated violence amongst our youth. There's a reason for all of this. So when we have lawmakers say that you need to take control of your child, that you're failing to do what you need to do as a parent, you really have to begin to take a look at how much control are you taking. Are you willing to take a fine, to take a sentence, because you took and you dealt with your child, right, in a manner that you saw fit to keep that child from being on the street? Sometimes there are extreme measures that we take to protect ourselves, to protect our families, right? But what are you willing to do, right, in order to bring about change within certain systems that continue to tell you what to do and what not to do, but then once they're in, it's a wrap. And we know that. So what are some of the things that you're willing to do, right, to continue to sit there and watch your child bag up, or cap up drugs, and then, you reap the benefits from that, and then as soon as you get locked up, you want to go lay blame. You can't lay blame. You sat there, you participated. You just didn't roll nothing up. You just didn't cap nothing up, but you still participated. So there are things, and that's just the extreme side. The other side to it is, what do you do when your child is having difficulty in school? Right? Do you call up one of their peers? Do you call up a family member who's good in math, who's good in history, who's good in English? Do you sit down yourself and you do the work with the child so that way the child is very clear? Do you ensure that your child has a clear understanding? There are so many things that are not looked at in childhood development because the parent wants to believe that they are the best at what it is that they're doing without assistance. But you only parent, remember what I said before, you only parent one of two ways, right? You do for your child that which was not done for you. You don't do for your child, to your child, what your parents did to you if it was a negative effect, right? So you avoid things and you contribute to things, right? But all the other stuff, this is like, listen, we make it up as we go along. We really do. Because children present us with so many challenges. Hell, we're adults and we're presented with so many challenges in adult relationships, right? So then we have to look at, once the child, comes to a certain age, what kind of environments they begin to involve themselves in. Then when they start getting into middle school, when they start getting into high school, right? What kind of environments are they living in? Because now we've gone from outside the home to more frequency, in environments where you'll spend more time with other people than your family. And I always tell people, my staff, when I supervise staff, that we spend more time together as staff than we do with our own family members. Think about it. 40 hours a week you're with your coworkers. How many hours a week are, your children in school with other children, right? And how many hours are those children, with their families? They see them on the weekend, right? They may see them in the evening when there's dinner time, if they're even home, if that even happens. Sometimes you'll see them at breakfast time. Sometimes, parents are still asleep. The kids already got their lunch packed, or they pack their own and they roll out. But what I'm saying to you is, the environments begin to change, right? What you needed to do for your child, from 0 to 6, changed. They started school. They started going to Head Start, whatever they call it. They start going there. Now they're exposed to other children, but the need for the parent to be involved is still more prevalent. As the child enters into the latter years, right, in school, when they start looking at, 8, 9, 10, and they start getting into that age, when they start developing self-concept, self-perception, again, they're exposed to other idea, not ideal, ideal is one thing, is what's written. Idea is what you think. So they get exposed to an idea of life through different perspectives, right? So their need for you begins to sway, because now they're coming into self and they don't kind of go to you as much about things, because they seek their peers. And even regardless of if you have a good or a bad relationship, when children get to a certain age, they begin to gravitate towards a peer group. So by the time they get to high school, they have decided who they are, they have decided what they need from us as parents, and they're moving on with their lives, and every now and then they'll ask us questions and so on and so forth. And again, it depends on the kind of relationship. But what I'm saying to you is they're exposed to all of these things. So a childhood environment is very important. And as we go into this list of traumatic incidents, traumatic events, significant events that bring about trauma within the child, you're going to see exactly what it is that I'm talking about. Because unfortunately or fortunately, what I'm about to do is I'm about to take you down memory lane. I may take you somewhere that you don't want to go. You know, I may take you somewhere where you may go back there and realize some things that are happening in your life today, and give you a clearer picture as to why you are who you are today. Right? Why? Because it's by design that things are the way they are in our society. And once you understand the design, right, you remap and reshape that design within your own mind, and you begin to focus on your purpose. Because life is about living on purpose. What is your purpose? Right? So listen, let me take a sip of this coffee. Good morning, sis. Sis, what are you doing up? I figured you'd still be out house shopping or something. What's up, cuz? Eugene, good to see you, brother. Love you, man. So listen, let's go to, now the last article came from Psychology Today when I was talking about those 4 things. So now I'm on the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. That's the NCTSN, right? And this is about early childhood trauma, right? So let me read from the article. Early childhood trauma generally refers to the traumatic experiences that occur to children aged 0 to 6, because infants and young children's reactions may be different from older children's, and because they may not be able to verbalize their reactions to threatening or dangerous events. Many people assume that young age protects children from the impact of traumatic experiences. And I said that to you in one of the previous shows. It's a misconception, right? When young children experience or witness a traumatic event, sometimes adults say they're too young to understand, so it's probably better if we don't talk about it. However, young children are affected by traumatic events, even though they may not understand what happened. And that's what we tend to lose sight of. See, we attempt to conceptualize the brilliance of God and man's creation, right? Because what we think, right, is only based on what we don't recall ourselves. But we don't realize why we don't recall these things when we talk about trauma, right? We have good childhood memories and we have bad childhood memories. I can remember a lot of the good things about my childhood. I can remember a lot of bad things about my childhood. But bad and traumatizing are different, right? So we have to be clear on that, right? Because things that happen that are bad don't necessarily impact me, right? I just wasn't a good event, right? You know, but then there are things that impact me that I get shook. My spirit is shook by it, right? And that's where the trauma comes in. So a growing body of research, back to the article, has established that young children, even infants, may be affected by events that threaten their safety or the safety of their parents or caregivers, and their symptoms have been well documented. And I talked about it in previous shows, and I've been talking about it, you know, since I started doing research back in 2002, 2003, on father absenteeism, and I started looking at the impact that parental separation was having on the child. And this is something that's not even dealt with in treatment. For males, it's not. The first thing when a female goes into treatment, first thing she's asked about whether she has children, whether she's pregnant. That's the first thing. Because services are put right into place for her and her child or coming child, right? Things put right into place. When it comes to males, it doesn't happen. One of the greatest traumatizing incidents that people constantly avoid dealing with in treatment, whether it's substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment, couples counseling and things like that, people always miss that part, right? And someone say, oh, your parents, you probably weren't together. Okay, so what do you know about that though? Since you say that, since you want to identify negative behavior and tell me because of this negative behavior, you probably live in a single parent environment, probably raised by your mother, because no, black men don't stay in the home, right? You hear all those kind of things. So when you have a belief system like that, you'll never challenge the impact of that separation, right? And help that person to understand what's happening. See, I didn't realize that I missed my father until I got clean, right? I was 34 years old. I was doing some step work, in a 12-step program. I was, learning some things about myself. And when I got to the 4th step and I started writing about how I missed my father, I remember clearly. I was riding either the subway or the L, and I was sitting there writing, and next thing you know, my eyes welled up and a tear hit the paper. And I just sat there and I stopped writing and I started crying, and I didn't want anybody to know that I was crying. And I just sat there and acted like but I missed my father, right? I missed my father. And when I say I missed my father, it wasn't the missing in terms of he was there, and I can recall that interaction, then he was gone. I didn't really have a relationship with him coming up. But inside my spirit, in my psyche, the separation was evident. And we bypassed this part, right? 23 chromosomes of his is inside of me. So how can there be an absence by either parent and the child not be affected? They're connected to both. But listen, but y'all know how I get when I start talking about fatherhood and the need for both parents to be together. But I'm going to go on with the article. These traumas can be the result of intentional violence, such as child physical or sexual abuse or domestic violence, or the result of a natural disaster, accident, or war. Young children also may experience traumatic stress in response to painful medical procedures or the sudden loss of a parent or caregiver. Again, we're getting into the trauma itself. So, now I'm going to go to types of traumatic stress. Children can be exposed to a range of traumatic experiences, right? So I want to go down this list of traumatic types. And this is not all of them. This is just some of them. And out of those on this list, I'm certain that you can find one, maybe even two, on that list that has impacted you, right? And it's currently impacting your children, right? Or your child, or the relationship you're in with an adult. And you know some things about their childhood. You'll be able to see that. Let me check and make sure. I gotta check one thing because I didn't check it before, and somebody probably tell me, hold on y'all, because this was a problem last week. Yep. Let me see. Okay, so the mic is on. Sorry. See, no, I don't have. You can catch this show on Twitter as well live. I keep forgetting to turn the mic back on because one of the things I was having is I was having a whole lot of feedback come in from the mic, and I didn't understand why. So I resolved that matter. So I apologize for those of you who have been watching it live, right, on Facebook. I apologize. I got the sound right now. It's on. So now we're on this list here. So the first thing on the top of that list is community violence. Community violence. Now, how many can relate to community violence? Now, we know that we've had a number of incidents that have taken place in communities, in religious communities, the mosque, the masjid, the churches. Like we've had that. Now, that's a community, right? That's a community where you're going. It's a sense of safety there, right? It's safety there. So when you go there, you start looking at we're in the most vulnerable condition because we are focusing on God and being in alignment in that moment with God. Praying, getting the word, getting the spiritual message, feeding our spirit. The most vulnerable condition we're in. And in most cases, our backs are to the entrance, right? Our backs are to the entrance. You don't expect those kind of things to happen. This is a sudden incident, right? There are children in these establishments as well, right? How does that affect them? Being in an environment where we're supposed to be in there praising God, and here we can't even go do that safely. We go to the playground and there's bullets hitting the backboards, right, as opposed to basketballs. We can't even go to the playgrounds anymore because of the violence, because people out there using drugs and alcohol and becoming unruly, and fighting and the language and all those things. It's not even a safe environment to go have fun because you're playing ball, but you're also looking behind you to see if what's going on. And when you see little Boo Boo and his crew show up, you already know what's going down. So that fun now becomes a stressful event because you're just trying to play ball, but also trying to watch that going on, right? You got to look at those kind of things. So community violence, back to the article, includes predatory violence, robbery, for example, and violence that comes from personal conflicts between people who are not family members, right? We're talking about community violence. It may include brutal attacks such as shootings, rapes, stabbings, and beatings. Children may experience trauma as victims, witnesses, or perpetrators. We're talking about community violence now, right? So I remember back as a teen, right, living in Wilson Park Project in South Philly, right, a whole lot of things that took place. Seeing people shot, seeing people shot at, seeing the police running through the community, right, seen all those things, right, heard the stories, and to hear the stories as well about events taking place in the project as a child, you internalize that. You live there. How safe do you feel? And we haven't even talked about in the home. We're still talking about community. How safe do you feel? I talked about going back and forth to school as a child and the racial conflicts that were existing during that time in the late 60s and the early 70s when I was walking back and forth to school, and how I was chased with hockey sticks and had rocks and bottles thrown at me by white children, by white adults, right? Grown folks. You chasing a child, throwing rocks at a child, you chasing a child, trying to hit him with a hockey stick. That's a terrible existence. And to deal with that, just about every single day, either going to school or coming home from school, and then still continue to experience racial tensions into younger, when I was like in my teens or going to high school. Remember the bus being attacked by whites and with baseball bats and, coming onto the bus and us fighting, for our lives, and the bus driver opening the door and letting them in because he was white. And remembering all of those things that I had to deal with as a child. Right? And then you're looking at, our home getting robbed, getting broken into and burglarized, on not once, not twice, but 3 or 4 times. And there was one time when our house was burglarized when my sister and I were in the bed, sleep, upstairs. They broke into the house, junkies. They broke into the house, right? That's when heroin was the big thing. Well, heroin is still a big thing. But, in the 60s, we're in the bed, sleep. They broke into the house, robbed the house, but even sat down at the kitchen table. That's how bold they were. Because they knew my mother worked overnight. And they knew we were upstairs asleep. And they broke into the house and sat down and ate all the candy. Because, heroin addicts eat a lot of sweets. And, that happened numerous times. So, you begin to feel like, damn, I'm not safe in my own home. Right? And then I remember, having a 12-gauge shotgun stuck in my face. About as close as I am to you right now. The guy wanted this silver chain that I had around my neck, and he was taking the silver chain, for somebody else. Because the person who owed me money for the chain didn't pay it. I came to his house repeatedly, got my chain back, and told him, when you get the money, you can have the chain back. So we had some dude, who lived that life, step to me, put a 12-gauge shotgun in my face and took the chain back. I just, gave it back to him and said, it's still coming back to me. So I'm going through all this, and I mean, I became like somewhat desensitized. I wasn't even scared. I wasn't even scared. I wasn't even afraid. For my life. It's like, yo, I'm talking to dude like we're talking right now. And he just said, listen, let's have it. Gave it to him, handed it to him, and kept on going. And went on about my life. And saw this dude every day. So there were a number of things in that life. And living in Wilson Park Project in South Philly. Then I moved from there and went on. So by the time I moved from South Philly, headed up to North Philly, I was a different person. I wasn't a squeaky clean kid, so a lot of things changed. But community violence. Look at all of those things that your child is exposed to in the community. And when they don't feel safe, even in their own home, and then they go outside of their home, and it's not safe, what do you think that does to their psyche? What do you think that does to their self-perception? What changes do you think happens within their development? It takes them certainly outside the natural order of development. Things change. Things change. When you look at nothing but bars on every other corner, when you look at house parties, when you look at people sitting on the step, twisting up, or snorting up, or drinking up. When you look at all those things that the child has to walk past every single day, you're sick of it. You're sick of it. What does that do to a child mentally? To have to deal with these dudes on my step again. And I gotta say, excuse me, they don't even live here. For real. Or these dudes pushing up on my sister all the time, and I want to step to them because I'm supposed to as a little brother. I'm not saying it happened with my case. I'm just saying the mindset, that's my sister, man. What's... And your sister having to fight for you. Or you want to defend your family members and you pick up something and you strike somebody with it. The ball starts rolling. The ball starts rolling. You know, when we keep telling these young boys they need to put down their guns, first thing they tell you is when they put theirs down, then I put mine down. Well, I got to walk these streets every day, and every day that these young men walk the streets, you know, they have to deal with predators in their communities, right? That's the nature of the community environment that does not change, and until that changes, it's going to keep being the same outcomes. It's going to keep right on being the same outcomes. So, community violence is it's not listed in terms of 1 through 10 and, you know, top. It's that this just happens to be the first one. The one I want to have a little more discussion on is the complex trauma. Back to the article. The term complex trauma describes the problem of children's exposure to multiple or prolonged traumatic events and the impact of this experience on their development. And we got to keep going back to their development. And in order for you to understand what that means, you have to go to childhood development so you can get an understanding. And I like to use Freud's psychosocial Freud's it's not escaping me. Freud. Let's go to Freud. You know, on childhood development, on how children develop, and they'll tell you the stages and ages of growth and what the child should be doing at certain points. Typically, complex trauma exposure involves the simultaneous or sequential occurrence of child maltreatment, including psychological maltreatment, neglect, physical and sexual abuse, and domestic violence that is chronic, begins in early childhood, and occurs within the primary caregiving system. Now, this is what you got to understand. In the primary caregiving system. The primary caregiving system. Now we're in the home. The primary caregiving system. The family system. Where the child spends its primary time of being raised, of its development. That's what we're talking about here. Right? Exposure to these initial traumatic experiences and the resulting emotional dysregulation and the loss of safety, direction, and the ability to detect or respond to danger cues often sets off a chain of events leading to subsequent or repeated trauma exposure in adolescence and adulthood. This is real important stuff here, right? Because this is going into now what we just came from in the previous episodes of how childhood trauma affects adult relationships. Because when we're talking about complex trauma here, right, I gave you a list a few minutes ago of all these different events. This is prolonged trauma. This is sequential trauma. This is ongoing trauma, right? So my trauma hasn't stopped. It means one event after the next, 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 right? To include parental separation at the age of 5, the stress in the womb that my mother endured because of the domestic violence happening at the time, right? The events going back and forth to school, okay, following me? The events in school, because there was violence in the schools as well, because I went to Bach in South Philly. They were like 5th Street, 5th Street, 6th Street, 7th Street, 8th Street. There was Fitzwater, Mifflin. You had all these gangs, right? And I went to Bach. Then I also went to Wagner in West Oak Lane, which sat on the, which was the borderline between Somerville and the Clang, right? Then I went to Shoemaker. I went to Heston and Shoemaker, which also had a whole bunch of gangs, you know, there. So I talked about all those different things. Now, that's school. Now, then my first arrest, right? Traumatic experience, right? Then failed relationships, geographic changes, right? Failed marriages, right? So this has been like a string of trauma. And listen, and I'm not by myself. I'm not by myself. And a lot of times what happens is we're so caught up in trying to pursue success, whatever that means to you, in life, that we lose sight of what's necessary for us to heal. And being by yourself don't necessarily mean you're going to heal. And people often use that. Like after a relationship, you should give yourself a break because you need time to heal. But you're forgetting about childhood. About childhood. And we call that being resilient, right? But you can be resilient and bounce back and keep moving forward, but you still have to deal with self. You still have to deal with self. You can't avoid this, right? So I start looking at all of those things, and I want you to look at all of those things. Look at your entire life. Look at your entire life. Up to right now where you are. Because there's probably, listen, then I had a car accident, right? A near fatal car accident where my car went off the highway. I mean, listen, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. What I'm saying to you is when you look at trauma, it tells it here. The term complex trauma describes the problem of children's exposure to multiple or prolonged traumatic events and the impact of this exposure on their development, right? Those things impacted me. So now, it said off the last sentence said exposure to these initial traumatic experiences and the resulting emotional dysregulation and the loss of safety, direction, and the ability to detect or respond to danger cues often sets off a chain of events leading to subsequent or repeated trauma exposure in adolescence and adulthood. Gotta understand this, folks. So we're in relationships with other people, right, who have similar histories. If not similar in terms of the traumatic events, they've had traumatic events happen in their lives. So what we're ultimately doing is we're triggering one another's traumatic events because of the unresolved of those events within our lives. And you know what? And I said this before. Some of those things you can recognize. Some of those things you legitimately cannot recognize. But the importance here is that we look at what impact that relationship that we're in is having upon us. I'm trying to tell you here. Because if you don't look at that, if we don't look at the relationships that we find ourselves in, not just now, but even before there was an attraction. Not only do hurt people, but hurt people gravitate towards one another too. Yeah, because we understand. We can relate. And people don't listen. And this is the part that people tend to miss. Really do. How do hurt people hurt people? Well, if I was abused, physically abused as a child, what is the likelihood of me becoming an abuser? If I was sexually abused, sexually assaulted as a child, what is the likelihood of me being promiscuous or being sexually abusive to someone else, violating someone else, right? Or the sexual abuse can also take the form of deprivation, of the partner deprivation. So sex can be used in many different forms or misused in many different forms, right? And we have to look at that, right? And it's not your fault that this happened, right? But somewhere along the line, you have to begin to see where this event or events has put you. I also talked about being involved sexually at the age of 13. with an adult. And from my perception as a child, that's what's up, yeah. And I was getting all the attaboys in the world because I was, yeah, you getting it in. While my peers were still talking about it. I was coming back, you know, telling them the story about, yeah, mm-hmm, yeah. They will smell my fingers. That's the kind of stuff we did as kids. But anyway, so, but I don't look at, I didn't look at the impact that it was going to have later. It was just in the moment. In the moment, that's what was happening. In that moment, in the moments, in the years to come, it was the same thing. It was the same exact thing. So when I started looking at that behavior, right, I had to look at my sexuality and how I was living my life sexually, and how I began to believe that that was a responsibility of mine to perform for my partner sexually. That nothing else had mattered. Nothing else mattered. It was a matter of we have sex. That's what we do. That's the highlight of the relationship. What do you want? What do you mean you want a hug? What do you mean you want me to do such and such? I just want to do it. And then I looked and found myself in many relationships just like that, because it began and it ended with sex. Sex was the only thing that was prevalent. Everything else was a fight, an argument, a disagreement. That's all they ever were. But again, not only do hurt people gravitate towards others because we want to help the others hurt go away. Yeah, so we become saviors. I've been playing the role of the white knight for a long time. I want to take people away from a condition that I see them in, that because I can provide for you, because I can take care of you, because I'm not that person who you were with, or those people that you have been involved with. What happens is we make people, right? We make people the other person. No matter what you do in a relationship, that other person ultimately becomes the same person all over again, because the other person also helps keep that person who they dislike, who harmed them, they keep that person alive by directing it at you. That person stays alive. So the person who abused you is kept alive. Is kept alive. Every time you interact with your partner, you keep that other person alive. You're not going to do this, and you're not going to do that, and I've been through that. We keep that alive. We keep that alive. We keep that hurtful person, that person who hurt us, we keep them alive. And we don't even see we're doing it. We don't see we're doing it. So it's real important to understand self. You got to understand childhood trauma. You got to understand the things that you've been through throughout the course of your life. And you got to see how these things are playing out in your life, and how come relationships continue to be failing. You got to stop choosing the same people. That's what we're ultimately doing. We got to stop choosing the same people. Right? We have to be making sure that when we make these selections, that, you know, that the person themselves is seeking to bring resolve to the unresolved. And if that's not happening, it's going to be the same cycle. It's going to be the same exact cycle. It's not going to end. When we look at from the capacity of the primary caregiving system, we also want to look at the messages that we've been sent or are being sent, right, about relationships, right? We have to look at what examples do we have. The first example we have of a healthy relationship comes from our parents, obviously. right? We look at that relationship, and although our parents do their damnedest to give us a rational, explanation as to why they hate each other, it's still evident that they hate each other. What does hate look like? Hold on. What does hate look like through your lens in watching your environment between your two parents? They live in the same household. They cuss each other out. They beat the shit out of each other, right? But then you hear the moans upstairs in the bedroom. And they come out laughing and kiki. Okay, we sit to the table and we eat together. We go places together. They beat the shit out of each other again. I hear the moans from the bedroom again. What messages am I being sent about relationships? Right? Now, we haven't even talked about, right, when mom was at work, how dad had this other woman over the house, or how, when dad was at work, mom had this dude, come over, or now they're not together, they're not living together, but they're seeing different people and they're still seeing each other. So dad come over, he's supposed to be coming over to talk to me because mom called him about my behavior in school, but somehow or another, the moans happen again. He leaves, they over the phone cussing each other out. What kind of messages am I being sent about relationships? We're out in the street, right? We're going shopping to the store. I'm with dad. Dad walking with me, but he hitting on everything that walks past. Telling me, yo son, look at that. Yo, that's... And he looking at, yeah, dad, yeah. And what kind of message is being sent? When you say, I love your mother, but you out here doing this. Same way with mom. You at the playground. You sitting there chilling. Here come Rigo Suave. Pushing up on you. You sitting there kicking and laughing. Go ahead. No, baby, no. You can go on the swing. Go ahead. And she's sitting there and, and then get back home. I love your father. What kind of messages are we sending? You have to look at all these things, because these are the messages that our children have gotten about us as adults and about adulthood. And it's been reinforced. It's all been reinforced. We're reinforcing it. We can't blame others for why our children are doing what they're doing. And listen, even God said, listen, you have your own free will. Make decisions. These are your choices. In the end, the outcome is determined by you. So, for us as parents to say that it's not our fault, you're correct in many ways. It's not our fault that the child has made the decisions that they've made. But ask yourself, what kind of contribution did you make? I got him anything that Daddy wanted. I took him to the best stores. I did this for him. I did that for him. I worked 80 hours a week, right? So he can have all these things. Oh, light bulb, 80 hours a week. You working 80 hours a week. What kind of quality time do you have with the child? Oh, that's why they're so twisted when it comes to being involved in a quality relationship. Because they believe that they can work all these hours, holler at home girl every now and then, buy her a few things, take it to the 5-star restaurant, take it to the 5-star hotel, and she should be good. Not. So you gotta start looking at these things, right? You gotta look at all these things. What level of intimacy was expressed in the home? Were there a lot of hugs and kisses and being tucked in at night and told bedtime stories and having those, just before I go to sleep conversations about the day and those kind of things like that? I didn't have that. So I yearn for it now. In all my relationships that I've had, it's like I've yearned for affection. I just like, yo, hug me, hold me, kiss me, squeeze me, tell me you love me. I don't need the extra stuff. I don't need the extra stuff. That's all I want. I just want you to love me. I just want to love you. I don't, the other stuff don't matter. Why are we making other things that are hurtful and painful and difficult the center of focus? I entered into this because I just want to be loved and loved. That's what I'm looking for. Right? So again, when we look at complex trauma, look it up. Complex trauma. Look it up. Because we are still, in many ways, being traumatized, right? Being traumatized by the relationships that we're in. And again, it's not blaming the other person. It's a matter of us looking at how that person, right, for being who they are, is negatively affecting you. And not because of them being negative, but because of them being them. Being themselves. They're not doing anything wrong, but what they're doing is negatively impacting you. It's re-traumatizing you. And we in many ways re-traumatize ourselves because we have no resolve to those particular things. So it's not about the other person. It's never about the other person. That other person may be a trigger for you. And you may have to make a decision. You may have to make a decision. Okay? The next thing that's on the list is domestic violence. And like we have like about 4 minutes before the show ends. Let me tell you about that ding. That it's a notification that when I get messages, right? So typically what used to happen is I used to be able to control the calls, but the calls were actually helping me to know, for instance, if the sound was not working on Facebook, or if there was a difficulty with the sound. So for those of you who tuned in earlier and you didn't have any sound, it didn't dawn on me until I heard the notification on the phone. That's whoops, because I got to check the mic. And again, I have to be reminded of that because I keep the mic off. I keep the lens covered on the camera because people can hack into your system, folks, and be sitting there watching everything you do in your house. Everything. Some of us keep our laptops in our bedrooms, right? You see everything you're doing, right? Everything. Hear everything you're saying, right? And it's like a wiretap, you know, in your home, and you have no clue. You sitting there, all this out, you online doing, you know, on Facebook and stuff, and all this is out, somebody's sitting there watching you. All this is out, and you know, you got the laptop sitting in a position where it's sitting between your legs on the bed, and all this is out, and somebody's sitting there just getting a freebie. Yeah. So, you know, it's important, right, that I get back into the habit of cutting my microphone back on before the show. So I apologize for anyone who tuned in earlier on Facebook. But again, I'm glad I can have it live also on Twitter. And I'm also recording it on my Canon camera because I loaded into, I downloaded and then uploaded into my Daddy's Right Here YouTube educational station. We're not finished, folks. We are not finished. This is a long list. I think it's about like 12. Let me see. It's about 12 types that are listed on this site. We got community violence, complex trauma, domestic violence, early childhood trauma, medical trauma, natural disasters, neglect, physical abuse, refugee trauma, school violence, sexual abuse, terrorism, traumatic grief. Listen, I posted the definition of terrorism, that according to the Department of State. I posted it on Facebook. If you get a chance, check it out, because we keep asking the question, why are only certain groups, certain people identified as terrorists? And we start looking at terrorism, and listen, it's there. Just check it out. But anyway, so there are a few things here. We've got a whole list to go down. So today we talked about community violence, and we talked about complex trauma. Next Sunday we're going to talk about domestic violence, early childhood trauma, and we may have some time to go into medical trauma. But this is some real heavy stuff, some real deep stuff. But guess what? It's very significant. It's very significant. It's not your partner. It's you. It's you. It's me. It's not your partner. We have to take a look at ourselves, and we have to take a look at things that we've dealt with throughout the years of our lives, right? As children, first and foremost, right? And how we shape our perception of the world around us, our worldview, our world lens. That's important to understand about a person.